The European Union has a plan to fix the way that copyright works on the internet. You've probably heard of it. It's called Article 13 and it's about to become law throughout the European Union. But there's a problem. Article 13 is really controversial, and some people think it could completely change the way we share content online and make it really difficult for small sites to compete with tech giants. So what is Article 13? It's actually just one small part of a much wider directive called the Directive on Copyright in the Digital Single Market. The whole point of the directive, according to the EU, is to help spread money more evenly between the people that make content, like musicians and journalists, and the platforms that host and share that content. The EU argues that up until now, big platforms like Google News or YouTube have been making loads of money by hosting other people's creative content, but they haven't been funneling much of that cash back to the people who made it in the first place. That's where Article 13 comes in. The idea is to make sure that platforms have licenses for any copyrighted content they want to host, and if they can't get a license for that content, they have to make sure that it doesn't go online in the first place. That might sound pretty obvious, but it's actually been a bit of a grey area for as long as the internet has been around. Say you have a YouTube channel, and you upload a music video without permission from the publisher that made that video. That's definitely not legal. But who's at fault here? Is it your fault for uploading that video in the first place? Or is YouTube to blame for allowing you to upload that video and letting anyone find it online? That is what Article 13 wants to fix. It will force big platforms to be legally responsible for any copyrighted content they host. It will work in two ways. First, platforms can negotiate licenses with copyright holders, say record labels, that allow them to host that content on their platform. YouTube already does this. That's why there are loads of music videos on the platform. And second, if a platform can't get a license to share that content, they'll have to do everything they can to stop it going online in the first place. So who's behind Article 13? The EU is trying to position this fight as a kind of David versus Goliath. You've got the David of the European Union and the small publishers, and you've got the Goliath of the big American tech firms. In reality, it's more of a Goliath versus Goliath. On one side, arguing for Article 13, you have the big record labels and the collecting societies, which are organisations that collect copyright payments on their behalf. They really want Article 13 to come into action. On the other side of the debate, you've got the big tech firms, chief among them, YouTube. They really don't want to have to do anything that will force them to do more to take down copyrighted content. But things are a little more complicated than that. Other critics of Article 13 include Tim Berners-Lee, one of the original founders of the internet, Mozilla Foundation, MIT Media Lab, and the Electronic Frontier Foundation. It's also been criticised by a whole raft of European intellectual property law experts who argue that Article 13 just isn't compatible with existing European law. So what's the big problem? Well, Article 13 doesn't really explain how platforms are meant to stop all this copyrighted content from getting online in the first place. And critics of Article 13 argue there's only one way that's possible: upload filters. These would check all content that's uploaded to a platform and make sure to see whether it has copyrighted content or not. If it's got anything copyrighted in it, it doesn't get online. Simple, right? Not really. You see, upload filters might end up blocking loads of copyrighted content that it's actually completely fine to share online. The problem is that copyrighted content comes in a whole bunch of different forms. 10-second video of you lip-syncing to a Taylor Swift song, copyrighted. A GIF of a footballer scoring a goal, copyrighted. Distracted boyfriend meme, also copyrighted. Now, these examples are why you might have heard Article 13 being called the meme ban or the meme killer, but that's not really quite right. In reality, the text of Article 13 does allow for lots of exemptions where copyrighted content is completely fine to be shared online. In reviews, for example, or in cases of caricature, pastiche, or parody. In other words, memes are safe. But the problem is, no one is really sure whether upload filters will be able to tell the difference between exemptions, like memes, and other cases where copyrighted material should not be allowed on the platform. In fact, YouTube already has a system that checks everything that's uploaded to its platform for copyrighted content. It's called Content ID, and it doesn't always get things right. In 2016, for example, Content ID flagged a video by a Harvard law professor because it contained snippets of Jimi Hendrix songs. Now, these are technically copyrighted, but the video should have been completely fine because it was for educational purposes. Content ID has also flagged videos of birdsong and cats purring for incorrectly thinking that there is copyrighted music in there. Other upload filters have got things wrong too. In December 2018, when Tumblr brought into effect its porn ban, it accidentally blocked images of women protesting topless, even though it specifically said that that kind of nudity was completely fine. Now, critics of Article 13 are really worried that if Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube have to start filtering for copyrighted content, we'll have loads of cases of legitimate content that just isn't allowed online. And there's another issue. While the European Union has mostly concentrated on the impact that Article 13 will have on big tech firms, there's a real danger that it will also impact much smaller sites. You see, firms are only exempt from Article 13 if they fall into all three of the following categories. 1. They've been available to the public for less than 3 years. 2. They have a turnover of less than 10 million euros annually. And 3. They have less than 5 million monthly visitors. That leaves loads of platforms that will have to follow Article 13. For example, you've got Get Reeled, that's America's largest online fishing community, Patreon, which is a website that helps creators get paid for their work, and DeviantArt, which is an online photography website which helps people share art and photos and stuff. Critics of Article 13 argue that small sites won't have the power to negotiate fair licensing deals with the copyright holders, and also will find it too expensive to put into place upload filters to check for copyrighted content. They fear that faced with these heavy burdens, they might have to shut down altogether. So what's next? After well over 2 years of intense negotiations, Article 13 is about to go to the final vote in the European Parliament. That will take place in either March or April 2019. And if it does pass, and it's looking like it will, member states will then have 2 years to pass their own legislation that brings Article 13 into effect in their country. And although YouTube has been suggesting that Article 13 poses a real threat to its existence, it could end up doing quite well out of the legislation. You see, if platforms need to buy content filters to check for copyrighted content, who's going to sell it to them? Google. The internet giant has already spent more than $100 million building a copyright recognition system that's used by more than 9,000 broadcasters, record labels, and movie studios worldwide. You see, even when Silicon Valley looks like it's losing, it could really be winning.